Be thankful for the lesson, my sister sneered. After her husband stole 28 months of my work and the 100,000 in income, I created a business that completely ruined his. The hardest lesson I ever learned wasn't in trade school, it was discovering that family business could be a smokescreen for the most calculated soul-crushing betrayal. And my own sister, well, she was right there watching it all happen. I was 24, freshly licensed, brimming with naive optimism. The dusty air of my tiny apartment seemed to hum with the promise of a future I was ready to build, especially when my sister, Sarah, told me her husband, David, had an opening at his electrical firm. David owned a small electrical contracting company, always swamped with new builds, renovations, and panel upgrades. He had a solid crew of about 7 guys, but clearly he needed more hands. Sarah painted a picture, perfect scenario. I'd learn the ropes, David would get reliable help, and we'd all be one big, happy family. It sounded ideal. David agreed, but with a catch. Cash is tight with all this growth, he'd said, but I can pay you a small weekly amount for living expenses, and we'll settle up proper once things stabilize. He was talking 9, maybe 18 months, and like a complete idiot, young and desperate to prove myself, I agreed. That weekly wage, a measly $250. I was putting in at least 48 hours, often 58, eager to impress. I tackled the tough jobs, the ones his regular staff avoided. Those guys were making 28 to 34 an hour. I was making less than 6. But I kept telling myself it was temporary. David was good for it, right? And Sarah, my own sister, she wouldn't let me be duped. 9 months crawled by. I approached David hesitantly. What about fair pay? I asked. He just shrugged, repeating his spiel about the company still finding its feet, adding, "You're learning so much, isn't that worth something?" I went to Sarah, desperate. Her advice? David stressed, "Be patient, your experience is worth more than money." So I waited. 18 months passed. I brought it up again. This time, David's irritation was palpable. He called me ungrateful, said he'd taken a chance on me when no one else would. "You can leave," he challenged, "but you'll have to start over." He even twisted it, claiming he was helping me by not paying. And Sarah, she echoed him, telling me I was part of the family business, to think long-term. "Money isn't everything," she lectured, from the comfort of her 4-bedroom house that David had bought. I stayed another 18 months. Why? Maybe I was waiting for a change that never came. Maybe I was terrified of starting from scratch. Or maybe, just maybe, I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that my own sister would allow this to happen. By the 28th month, I'd crunched the numbers. David owed me over 14,000, factoring in standard interest. I brought it up during a Sunday meal at their house, laying out the spreadsheet, work hours, market rate for a licensed electrician, minus his pathetic payments. David just chuckled, a real, dismissive laugh. He claimed my figures were fake, that I was an apprentice, not a journeyman. $250 a week is plenty for a tradesman still learning. He scoffed. I pulled out my license. I wasn't learning? I shot back. He dismissed it as just paper, saying real knowledge came from him. Sarah, looking mortified, said I was ruining dinner, being dramatic. "If you're so unhappy," she said, her voice tight, "find a new job." So I did. I quit the next day, sending David a curt text about my absence, no explanation. He called me 14 times, I never answered. In those 28 months, I'd saved almost nothing. My $250 barely covered rent and groceries, but I had something else. I'd worked in every corner of the city. I knew the builders, the vendors, which inspectors were strict or reasonable. I knew David's job prices, knew he overcharged by 12%. I spent 10 weeks working for another contractor, saving every penny, planning my escape. Then, I applied for my own business license, proper electrical services. Simple, memorable. I started small with my tools and an old van. I contacted every builder and general contractor I'd met on David's jobs. "I'm on my own now," I told them. "My prices are fair, my work reliable." I got a few chances. Word spread. Within 7 months, my workload exploded. I hired my first employee, then another. By month 14, I had 5 people in an office. Despite my past poverty, I was building something truly mine. Of course, David noticed. How could he not? Several of his biggest clients had switched to me. They preferred my work, found my prices lower, and it wasn't because I poached them. They chose me. About 18 months after I left, he called. "You stole my business!" He roared. "You used my contacts! It's unethical!" I cut him off. "And not paying your brother-in-law for 28 months of work. Was that ethical, David?" The call ended abruptly. The next day, Sarah called. Before I could even say hello, she launched into it. "Mom's furious! Why can't you just let it go? You're tearing the family apart over things that happened years ago." Her voice rose, tightening, until she was breathless. I let her finish, then calmly stated, "You learned that I let David steal from me for 28 months. You learned I let it go while he paid his other workers fairly and gave me scraps." a beat of silence. You know, it really irritates you that I'm succeeding alone, doesn't it? She started explaining David's financial woes, how I'd taken his best clients, how I was responsible for his business failing. They chose me, Sarah, I said. They chose my company because I do better work at a fair price. No one forced them to switch. When I reminded her that David had plenty of money to pay his other staff, strangers making 28 to 34 an hour, while his own brother-in-law got 6, she went quiet again. The math was simple, I told her, not letting her get a word in. The call went downhill fast. She called me selfish, said I prioritized money over family. 28 months ago. I shot back. You preferred your husband's lies to your brother's livelihood. You chose that every time you told me to wait. Every time you said experience was better than money. Anger and a strange sense of relief washed over me as I hung up. I'd finally said what I needed to. Liam was in the office when I arrived, and he saw my face. Everything okay? He asked. I gave him the Cliff Notes version, working for family, getting screwed, sister enabling the cheater. He nodded, sadly. My uncle pulled something similar on my cousin, he said. Promised him a share of the landscaping company for a few years of cheap labor. 7 years later, my cousin was still cutting grass for minimum wage while uncle bought a new boat. Some family members just think they're entitled to free work. The next day, Noah called, wanting a quote for a huge commercial project, a new restaurant complex on the east side, 3 dining areas, a shared kitchen, a full build-out. This was my biggest chance yet, a $52,000 job. I promised Noah a quote by Monday. My weekend was a blur of bid work. Sophia, my financial guru, helped me Saturday afternoon. We spread the blueprints across my kitchen table, going over every circuit, every outlet, every light fixture. As I estimated materials and labor, she punched numbers into her laptop. Even with my lower price, the figures worked. I could undercut David, still make enough to hire a third person, upgrade equipment, maybe even buy a second van. Sophia printed the final offer. I rate it 3 times. Strong, professional, competitive. Monday morning, 8:15 a.m. The bid was emailed to Noah. That afternoon, 1:45 p.m. My phone rang. I got the job. Noah said my quote was professional, competitive. He mentioned David's bid was 12% higher, a simple paper price with no breakdown, no schedule, no details. He praised my complete proposal. It showed I was in control. The following week, I hired Caleb. He was 24, fresh out of trade school, just like I had been a few years ago. Eager to work, eager to prove himself, he showed up in clean work clothes, a packet with his license and exam scores in hand. What are your pay expectations? I asked. He mumbled he'd take whatever I thought was fair because he was inexperienced. You'll start at 24 an hour, I told him. His eyes widened. Are you serious? He whispered. I was dead serious. I remembered working hard for nothing. My staff would never feel that way. A few days later, Ryan texted out of the blue. Heard about the restaurant job. Congrats. Cole's treatment of you was always wrong. Multiple crew members agreed, but no one dared speak up for fear of losing their jobs. I thanked him and asked about David's business. Things are tough, Ryan reported. He's snapping at employees, bidding on jobs like he's desperate. The atmosphere is toxic. Ryan said 3 of David's clients had recently switched contractors, not to me but away from David. Word was his work had declined. Jobs took longer, estimates were wildly inconsistent. One client had called him 3 times to fix a panel installation. In this industry, that kind of behavior spreads fast. Builders talk. Once damaged, a reputation is nearly impossible to repair. While David's business crumbled, mine soared. The satisfaction was genuine, but it couldn't mend the rift with my sister. Tuesday evening, my mom called. I was finishing paperwork in the office, and her name popped up. We chatted about the weather, her garden. Then she got to the point. She invited me to Sunday dinner, suggesting we sit down and talk like adults. David, she said, was even willing to discuss Sarah missing me. What's there to talk about? I asked. Mom insisted we needed to move on. I offered, if David brings a $17,600 check with interest. Mom went silent. Then, you're being unreasonable. My jaw tightened. Mom, I stressed, David exploited my work for 28 months for money. Sarah made it about family when she told me to be grateful for being used. Mom insisted I was misrepresenting, that David was family despite his mistakes. Working 58 hours a week for $250, I countered, made me wonder if I was still family. She didn't reply, just said she hoped I'd reconsider and hung up. The next Monday, the restaurant project officially began. Liam and Caleb arrived at 6:45 a.m. I brought the plans and we walked through with Noah. Taking it down to the studs left a clean canvas. We arranged panels, installed conduit. Liam oversaw the main dining room, Caleb the kitchen circuits. I kept an eye out, intervening as needed. The job ran smoothly, no wall surprises or hidden issues. By day 9, the first level was roughed in. Noah visited that Friday afternoon, clipboard in hand, reviewing our progress. He nodded at the panel installation, tested a few connections. "I'm amazed," he said. "You guys are ahead of schedule and the quality is excellent." He offered more projects, asked if I was interested. "Always looking for good work," I told him. The following week, Chloe called. Her name popped up in the van on my way to a supply run. "Do you have time for a big project?" she asked. "Time matters," I replied. She told me about a 28-unit townhouse subdivision that needed full electrical service. Work would continue for months. She said. I wondered why she called me instead of her usual contractors. "I'm finished with David," she stated bluntly. He missed my last 3 project deadlines. His team was disorganized, and I had code violations requiring 4 inspections on one job. The hassle was just too much. I promised her an offer by week's end. "I'll await your reply," she said. The days lengthened. Most days I worked 11-hour shifts, sometimes 13, but it wasn't like working for David. Each hour was mine. Every dollar I earned went to me. I was making something real with my name on it. One evening, after working since 5:30 a.m., Sophia called. She needed to discuss business. We met at a coffee shop near her office. She opened her laptop, showed me the numbers. Revenue was rising, but she was worried about me. "You're working too many hours," she said. "Burnout is real. You need to think about long-term growth. Hire another electrician soon. Consider a project manager for scheduling." I promised to consider it. Her look told me she didn't trust me. 4 days later, Sarah texted. I was unwiring an attic. "Coffee. Just us. No David." I contemplated the message. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I was curious about what she'd say. I replied that I was available Saturday. She sent a thumbs up. Saturday morning, I was first at the coffee shop, black coffee at a window table. Sarah arrived 12 minutes late, looking exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, messy ponytail. She ordered a milky, sugary drink and sat across from me. She just stirred her coffee, staring out the window. "Home life's tight," she finally said. "David's stressed about the business. Drinking more, getting mad over small things." She claimed he was obsessed with me and my progress, while he struggled. I said nothing, just waited. "How are you?" she asked. "Busy fine," I replied, nodding as if I expected that answer. I asked her directly if she understood my anger and departure. She launched into a long, rambling discourse about seeing both sides, how complicated relationships are, and how business and family shouldn't mix. I let her finish. Then I asked a simple question. Was David wrong not on me? She looked down at her coffee. "It's complicated," she mumbled. "What's complicated about it?" I pushed. "David had expenses," she said. "Business grew. Tight cash flow." I reminded her of those exact excuses from 28 months ago. She claimed I was being harsh. "I'm being right," I said. "Despite my love for you, Sarah, I can't be with you until you admit that what David did was theft. Not a family dispute or a misunderstanding. Theft," she cried. "You're making me choose between my husband and my brother." Others at nearby tables looked over. I spoke quietly but firmly. "You decided 28 months ago. You supported David's excuses when you told me to be grateful for being exploited. You chose him, not your brother. I accept your decision, finally." She wiped her eyes with a napkin. "It's unfair," she whispered. "All I ever wanted was fair compensation for my efforts," I told her. We sat in silence for another minute. She got up and left. I finished my coffee, watching passers-by. I felt sad, yes, but also clear, as if a muddy situation had finally resolved itself. The next week I prepared the townhouse bid. I measured the electrical needs for all 28 units, calculated panel loads and wire runs. I got the best prices by pricing materials from 4 suppliers. Labor costs were fair to my crew, but I still kept my total below David's estimate. Sophia said my numbers were good, suggesting ways to improve cash flow by adjusting the payment schedule. I submitted my bid Friday afternoon. Monday morning, Chloe called. I got the job. My proposal was detailed, competitive, and not too low. The contract guaranteed 9 months of steady work, so I could plan ahead instead of scrambling for the next job. Sophia helped me set up a payment schedule with draws at specific completion points. That same week, I applied for a small business loan. With larger projects coming in, I needed a second work van and more tools. The bank manager reviewed my finances and Chloe's contract. He approved the loan in 4 days. I wrapped a good used van with my company logo. During lunch one day, Caleb mentioned his trade school friend was job hunting. I asked him to have her call me that afternoon. She did. After checking references, her name was on my roster, but I wanted to meet her. Our meeting was the following Tuesday at my office. She looked nervous and young, maybe 24. When I asked about her experience, she said it was limited to school and a few residential jobs. I offered her apprentice pay with skill. merit-based raises. She accepted and started the next Monday. My crew now included Liam, Caleb, the new apprentice, and me. We started 2 job sites simultaneously. Liam and the apprentice led one crew, while I worked with Caleb. Coordination was harder than expected. I checked both sites several times a day, keeping everything on schedule. I worked 11-hour days again, but this time, I was building something mine. Adam called me that Wednesday afternoon. He'd used both David and me for several projects over the years. He informed me he would now work exclusively with my company. Why? I asked. David's recent work is sloppy, he said. His last job required 3 calls to fix sub-panel installation issues. Your guys are on time, and your work is cleaner. I thanked him, adding him to my growing client list. The next week, I saw Ryan at the electrical supply house. He was getting materials, and I was getting townhouse wire. He stopped me by the loading dock. David constantly blames you for his problems, he said, accusing you of stealing his clients and ruining his reputation. Ryan noted the toxic atmosphere at David's shop. Some crew members were looking for other jobs because David was always angry and punishing everyone. I'm sorry to hear that, Ryan, I said. But I haven't done anything wrong. Ryan acknowledged that. Everyone knows, he said. 3 days later, David visited one of my jobs. Liam called me on the townhouse project to say, someone needs you. David was standing next to his truck when I reached the front of the building. Unshaven, wrinkled shirt, bags under his eyes. He looked rough. He attacked immediately, accusing me of stealing his employees and sabotaging his reputation. I have to work, David, I said, trying to walk past him. He followed, insisting we discuss this. I turned around. I have never slandered you, I said, keeping my voice calm. My work quality and pricing attract clients. David confronted me. Everything you know came from working for me? He yelled. Liam walked over, asking, everything okay, boss? David stared at Liam, then at my crew, who had stopped working to watch. He retreated, pointed at me and said, this isn't over. Then he drove off. I called the non-emergency police line from inside, reported the confrontation, gave David's name and license plate. The officer said it was good to document, just in case he escalated. That night, Noah called. He'd learned about the job site incident from other contractors. Word spread quickly in this industry. I'm fine, I told him when he asked. Noah reported David's erratic behavior. He's losing bids because his proposals look rushed and desperate. Some contractors have stopped working with him because his quality has dropped. I thanked Noah for checking in and for the heads up. Sarah called that night while I was finishing office paperwork. Her voice was shaky and wet from the start, like she'd been crying. David came home from work and punched a hole in the kitchen wall, she said. Simply, he'd just walked in and slammed his fist through the drywall next to the fridge. She claimed he was screaming about me ruining his life, taking everything. She tried to calm him, but he kept pacing and yelling. Then she said something that made me queasy. I'm scared. Not mad, scared. She said he hadn't hurt her, but her tone suggested she wasn't sure he wouldn't hurt her. You should leave, I told her. Stay with Mom for a few days until David calms down. She was quiet for a while, then said she didn't want to worsen things. I felt that familiar frustration again, like I had for 28 months, watching her make excuses. Sarah, I said, when your husband is punching holes in walls, worse couldn't happen. She said she'd think about it and hung up before I could respond. The next morning, my lawyer called about routine business paperwork. I mentioned David visiting my job site and Sarah's wall punching story. After a moment of quiet, my lawyer asked if I'd considered a formal demand letter for unpaid wages. I hadn't considered legal action beyond moving on and starting my own business. He said a demand letter would document the debt and initiate legal action. It would prove David owed me and refused to pay. I contemplated that for days. I didn't expect David to pay just because of a letter. The man had laughed at me when I showed him the numbers. But documenting it, that felt important. Proof that I wasn't crazy, ungrateful, or dramatic. Proof that he owed me $17,600. I had the lawyer write the letter. He crafted a professional document listing hours worked, licensed electrician market rate, David's previous payments, and the difference. The letter gave David 21 days to pay or propose a payment plan. We sent it certified mail to prove delivery. I knew what would happen. And though I knew David would go ballistic, I sent it anyway. Because sometimes you just have to state the truth. David got the letter Tuesday. I know because he called me 2 hours later, screaming. He claimed I was destroying him. Called me a vindictive jerk who couldn't handle his chance. He said the demand letter was harassment and his lawyer would silence me. After letting him yell himself hoarse, I spoke. David, I said, my voice cutting through his rage, Stealing OI 17,600 and treating me like a dog for 28 months destroyed our relationship. The letter is factual. He called me more names and hung up. Sarah texted an hour later, a long rambling message begging me to drop the legal action. It will bankrupt David, she pleaded. It will ruin our lives. She accused me of cruelty. I read the text 4 times before responding. My reply was brief. David had 28 months to pay me fairly, but didn't. He is responsible for the consequences. She didn't text back. The following week, Sophia invited me into her office to review the monthly numbers. She smiled as she opened spreadsheets. She showed me the revenue column, explaining that my business had outperformed David's for the 4th month in a row. We were doing well, but seeing the numbers lined up hit me. I had built something bigger than David's in 18 months without exploiting anyone or lying to family. Just fair prices and solid work. It had been a long time since I felt that kind of pride. The same week, Ryan texted. The message was clear. He was giving David his 12-day notice and asked if I was hiring. I pondered that text. David's lead electrician. If he left, David's operation would suffer even more. But I wouldn't turn down a skilled electrician because of David's feelings. I told Ryan I'd consider him, but he had to understand I wouldn't get involved in David's departure drama. Ryan said he understood and just wanted to work somewhere where the boss didn't have a breakdown every day. I asked him to call me after his notice period to discuss details. David did not respond to the demand letter after 21 days. No call, no letter, nothing. My lawyer sued for unpaid wages. He said the court process would take months. Discovery, depositions, likely settlement talks before trial. Signing the paperwork. I tried not to think about Sarah getting upset. I found out quickly. Mom called me 3 days after the lawsuit was filed. She was upset, like she was when her kids fought over something stupid. She said I was dividing the family over money. Sarah was a mess and David was talking about losing everything. Drop it and move on, she pleaded. I took a deep breath, Mom. I reminded her. David's 28-month exploitation of me broke up the family. Sarah tore it apart when she told me to appreciate being used. I won't pretend it didn't happen anymore. She said my stubbornness would harm me later. Maybe, I replied, but I'd regret holding up for myself far less than letting others bully me. She hung up without saying goodbye. Sarah stopped calling after the lawsuit. After several texts in the first week, she never responded. Mom called 12 days later to say Sarah would always support her husband. She said Sarah thought I had attacked their family and tried to ruin David's business. I told Mom Sarah chose David's lies over my unpaid labor long ago. Mom said I was stubborn and family should forgive. She said nothing when I asked if David would pay me $17,600. She said she didn't know and asked when I'd come for dinner again. Once Sarah is ready to accept David's guilt, I said, not before. She sighed and hung up. Knowing my sister chose David over me hurt, but I couldn't keep denying it to keep the peace. I had to accept Sarah's decision even though it felt like losing a family member. 3 days later, Chloe called describing some regular builders she worked with. She said she'd been telling them about my company and how reliable my work was compared to local contractors. She gave me 3 numbers and names, all seeking reliable electrical contractors. The first one I called that afternoon said, Chloe recommended you. I need a quote for a 6-week commercial renovation. I drove out the next morning to inspect the site and crunched the numbers that night. The second builder called before I could. Chloe says you have fair pricing and finish on time. Can I get quotes for 2 residential projects next month? The third builder emailed, asking about my availability for a fall shopping center remodel. My calendar was booked 2 months in advance, and all 3 projects were quoted within 7 days. It was strange to see consistent work planned so far in advance. A year ago, I barely made $250 a week. Now, I had too many jobs. The company was growing solely through quality work and fair treatment of clients, completely unlike David's management style. David's lawsuit was well known among contractors. When Noah called to check on my business, I told him the lawsuit was about David owing me unpaid wages from when I worked for him. Noah said he'd heard David was in legal trouble, and some contractors were avoiding him. Ryan texted me a week later that David lost a major apartment complex contract. The client learned about the lawsuit and decided to avoid it. Ryan stated that the client specifically questioned David's business practices and reliability. Everyone communicates in the small contractor network. When David was sued for unpaid wages, people wondered if he was fair to others. I didn't tell the story, but I didn't hide it. When contractors asked, I told them I worked for almost nothing for 28 months while David charged clients full price. Some even reported past billing issues with David. Not much, but enough to make them think. David's reputation was suffering, and years-old decisions were finally catching up with him. Ryan's 12-day notice period ended, and I hired him. On his first day, he looked visibly relieved to work somewhere stable. When we upgraded commercial building panels, Ryan worked quickly and cleanly. His experience was exactly what we needed. During lunch, he announced that David's company was down to 2 employees. David hadn't replaced 2 guys who quit the week Ryan gave notice. Ryan said David was barely surviving on residential jobs like outlet installations and light fixture replacements. He'd lost larger contracts because he couldn't compete on price or reliability. Ryan described the office as a morgue the last few weeks he was there, with David stressed and snapping at everyone over minor issues. "Did he mention me?" I asked. "Yes," Ryan said. "All the time. He blamed you for every client and employee he lost." Ryan got tired of hearing David complain instead of solving his business problems. I felt a pang of something like pity, hearing how far David had fallen. But most of me still felt he deserved it for refusing to pay me fairly when he could. My lawyer requested David's financial records during discovery. After several weeks, David's lawyer turned over 4-year-old bank statements, client invoices, and payroll records. My lawyer called me into his office to discuss their findings. He laid out invoices on his desk, showing me that David had charged clients $28 to $34 per hour for my work. The invoices listed me as a licensed electrician on the projects. Then he showed me David's payroll records, clearly showing he paid me $200 to $50 per week regardless of my hours. My lawyer did the math in front of me. Over 28 months, David billed clients over 116. His total payment to me was $26,000. David kept the $9,000 difference, all while claiming the company couldn't pay me properly. My lawyer said this strengthened our case immensely. It showed David wasn't just struggling financially. He had deliberately lied about the company's situation and profited from my unpaid work. The records proved my claims of exploitation. David charged clients full price for a licensed electrician, but paid me less than minimum wage and kept the difference. The theft was obvious, and we had proof. 7 months after I filed the lawsuit, David's lawyer contacted mine to negotiate a settlement. My lawyer called to say David's side had admitted the debt, but couldn't pay the full amount right away. He doesn't have a $17,600 in the bank. My lawyer explained. His business is struggling. David's lawyer wanted to discuss settlement and payment terms. My lawyer asked what I wanted to do. "I want to hear their offer," I said. "But I'm not letting David off the hook." We planned a meeting for the next week. I waited at my lawyer's office for an hour-long conference call with David's lawyer. They offered $45,000 over 6 years. My lawyer, visibly insulted, countered with $90,000 in over 30 months. David's lawyer claimed he couldn't afford those terms. They kept going back and forth, and I just sat there growing frustrated. Finally, David's lawyer proposed $72,000 over 36 months. My lawyer looked at me. $72,000 was less than the $90,000 David had pocketed from my work, but it was more than I could reasonably expect at trial. My lawyer explained that going to court could result in a full judgment, but if David's business failed completely, it would be hard to collect. A trial would cost more money and time, and I might not even get more than the settlement offer. David could even declare bankruptcy, leaving me with nothing. I told my lawyer I would accept $72,000 over 36 months if David wrote me a letter admitting to the unpaid wages. I wanted more than just money. I wanted him to admit his mistake. My lawyer included this in the settlement. David signed a document admitting he owed me compensation for 28 months of licensed electrical work. He did not pay me. The settlement was no longer just about getting every dollar. It was about forcing David to confess. I felt a deep, profound sense of relief after signing the settlement. It wasn't perfect, but it resolved a long-standing issue. David would pay me in installments and, more importantly, acknowledge his debt in writing. The first payment was due in 21 days. After hearing about the settlement, Sarah called me after months of silence. Her name on my phone almost made me not answer, but I did. She was yelling before I could even greet her. She said I should have dropped the lawsuit, that the settlement was as bad as trial. She accused me of ruining David's business and their lives for small money. I let her finish. "Do you honestly think $72,000 over 36 months is going to destroy David, Sarah?" I asked. She said the amount wasn't important, that I refused to let go and move forward. She was still missing the point entirely. "It was never about money," I told her, my voice wary. "David cheated me for 28 months and told me to be grateful. My family status was used to deny me fair pay." Sarah called me dramatic, insisted David made a mistake, but shouldn't be punished forever. "When are you going to apologize for telling me to be grateful for being exploited?" I asked. She was silent. She couldn't even admit her own mistake. "Sarah," I continued, David's written dead admission confirmed everything I said. He charged clients full price for my work but paid me little. My settlement agreement proved I wasn't exaggerating or dramatic as you claimed. I received legal proof that David owed me wages. That admission proved I should leave and demand my money. I paused. Your loyalty was shown by your refusal to see that. Despite legal proof, despite the evidence that David exploited me, you chose him when this started and still do. I told her I knew our relationship might never recover. We each made a choice. You accused me of sacrificing family for pride, and I replied that you did the same by telling me to be grateful for being stolen from. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat with my phone, sad but decisive. Sarah wouldn't change her mind, and I wouldn't deny David's actions for peacekeeping. True self-disclosure and some relationships, and that was fine. My business, my team, my clients valued my work. That was enough. 4 years. 4 years later, I realized proper electrical services had passed the point where most small businesses fail. I had 18 employees on payroll. Liam was my commercial operations lead. Caleb commanded his residential crew. Ryan, with his experience, made bigger jobs run smoothly. We had 3 vans, a work truck, and an office with a receptionist who answered the phone while I was out. We were known for more than just good work. We were known for treating people well. I paid everyone fairly from the start. No delays, no vague promises to settle up. Someone who worked 48 hours was paid properly. When we finished a job under budget, I split the savings as bonuses. The crew knew I had their back, not with empty family stories, but with their weekly bank balances. The first David settlement check arrived Tuesday morning, 2400 on time, per his lawyer's payment schedule. I pondered the check's meaning. David had written a legal document admitting he owed me money, that I was right about being exploited. But the money itself was almost less important than what I could do with it. I called an all-office meeting that afternoon. People gathered, curious. The settlement payment has arrived, I announced. And I'm giving half of it to you all as bonuses. Lime grew quiet, his eyes red. I've been in this trade for 17 years, he said. And I've never had a boss share money like that. Most contractors would have kept every penny and called it loss recovery. We built this company together, I told them. Everyone who contributed to its success deserves to reap the benefits. Ryan approached me after the meeting. I saw David at the supply house last week, he mentioned. He looked rough. Tired, defeated. Ryan had been gathering materials for our townhouse project, and David was picking up a small order of basic residential supplies. David noticed Ryan, and for the first time, asked how I was doing, not with anger, just a quiet query. Ryan told him I was doing well and treating my crew properly. David just nodded, paid for his materials, and left. Ryan said it seemed David was finally beginning to understand what he had lost. Not just the clients or the money, but the opportunity to create something positive by treating others well. I saw Mom at the grocery store on Saturday morning. I was getting coffee, and she was in the produce section. She appeared surprised to see me, but not alarmed. We talked about normal things for a minute before she mentioned that Sarah and David were going through marriage counseling. The financial stress has made things worse, she said. David's anger issues. He punched another hole in the wall, yelling at Sarah over minor things. She stated, her tone cautious, that Sarah was finally seeing some problems clearly. Okay, yes, Mom said. She's handling it. I nodded and started walking away, but Mom touched my arm. I understand now, she said. Why you were so hurt. She apologized for not being more supportive when everything started. When I looked at her, I felt a shift. Not anger, but exhaustion. We got coffee from the shop next to the grocery store, sitting at a small table near the window. Mom kept apologizing, and I finally told her I didn't want apologies. I just want you to acknowledge that what happened was wrong. That David stole from me and Sarah supported him. Mom nodded. I see that now. She claimed she was so focused on keeping the family together that she didn't want to see how bad David's treatment of me was. She admitted making excuses for him because confronting the issue would have required her to confront the fact that Sarah married someone capable of such exploitation. I appreciated her candor. We finished our coffee. I love you, Mom, I said. But I can't keep pretending everything is fine with Sarah and David just to make family dinners easier. She said she understood. Noah called me on Monday to tell me about something big. He wanted to discuss a partnership opportunity. We met at his office that afternoon, and he went over the details. A major commercial development project, a new shopping complex with multiple buildings, a complete electrical contract worth over $260. And he stated that my company's reputation had grown to the point where I was competing for significant contracts. David's bids were sloppy and his reputation was mixed, so he never got the work Noah wanted. Noah said he'd worked with me enough to know I was capable of handling it. He wanted to collaborate, his company doing general contracting and mine handling all electrical, with profit sharing for the entire development. This was the jump I had been working towards: commercial work, large contracts, real growth. I accepted the partnership and immediately began planning the expansion. I called Sophia and told her we needed to restructure the business's finances to support long-term growth. I hired 2 more electricians within a week, both licensed and experienced. I paid them properly and assigned them to crews that already knew how to work together. Sophia assisted me in setting up the accounting system to track the commercial projects separately. The bank provided a line of credit to cover upfront material costs. Everything moved quickly, but it was controlled growth, not desperate expansion. I learned by watching David scramble and overextend. I was creating something that would last. David failed to make the second settlement payment. It was due on the 17th, but by the 20th, nothing had arrived. David's lawyer called and asked about modified payment terms. They wanted to extend the schedule and reduce the monthly amounts. My lawyer pushed back hard. The settlement was already generous compared to what David owed. The terms were clear. David's lawyer tried to argue financial hardship, but my lawyer pointed out that missing payments resulted in penalties under the agreement David signed. 4 days later, the check arrived, with an additional $650 in penalty fees. David was scrambling, his business was struggling, and the settlement payments were making matters worse. A small part of me felt bad. Most of me remembered being told for 28 months that I should be grateful for $250 a week. Sarah called me on Wednesday night. I almost didn't respond, but something made me pick up. She told me she had temporarily separated from David and moved in with her mother. Her voice was different, quieter, less defensive. She said she could finally see how David's pride and poor decisions affected everything. He treated me badly, ran his business poorly, and dealt with stress by becoming enraged and breaking things. She claimed the marriage counselor questioned her about David's behavior, which made her realize she had been making excuses for years, not just about me, but about everything. She asked if we could meet for lunch, just the 2 of us. I said yes. We met at a downtown cafe on Saturday. Sarah appeared tired but more present, as if she had been hiding behind something for years before finally stepping out. We ordered sandwiches, and she began talking before the food arrived. She sincerely apologized to me, not the half-hearted apology from before. She apologized for not believing me, for choosing David's version of events over mine, and for telling me to be grateful when I was exploited. She admitted she was afraid to see the truth, because it would mean admitting she married someone capable of treating family that way. That meant admitting that her assessment of the person with whom she had built her life was incorrect. She explained that watching David spiral over the last 18 months forced her to see things clearly: his outrage, his pride, his refusal to accept responsibility. She saw how he treated me and realized he could treat her similarly when times were tough. I assured her that I would not force her to make a decision. She had made her decision 28 months ago when she supported David instead of me. Now I was just dealing with the reality of that decision. We met for coffee again the following week, and this time, Sarah listened more than she spoke. I explained that while I could rebuild our relationship, David was no longer a part of my life. Not at family dinners, not during holidays. Never. I honestly didn't know if divorce would change that. The damage went beyond their marriage. It was about her enabling his exploitation of me while claiming family loyalty. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding. She wouldn't pursue reconciliation or manipulate David. She only wanted her brother back, whatever that meant. 4 weeks later, the medical complex contract went through. I had to process the numbers in the van because Sophia called me on a job site. Design, installation, and inspection of the electrical build, out 3 to 15,000, with milestone payments. The project would last 9 months. Although I had to hire more people and lease more equipment, the profit margin was still high. One contract would pay more than 4 years of proper wages at David's. I called Liam to announce our largest job ever. I removed the phone from my ear because he whooped loudly. David's final settlement payment arrived on time via certified mail with all legal paperwork. $72,000 paid over 36 months, every payment knowing it would hurt his struggling business. After depositing the check, I met with a commercial realtor that afternoon. I had been looking at properties for months, waiting for the right time. I found a small building near the industrial district with highway access, offices, a warehouse, and a workshop. The settlement funds paid the down payment. The purchase agreement was signed 3 weeks later. My sign replaced the previous owner's. Proper electrical services, boldly written on the front of a building I built from scratch after David tried to keep me small, dependent, and grateful for scraps. 4 years after texting David about leaving his company, I did a headcount for Sophia's new employee handbook in my own building. My 18-person staff included licensed electricians, apprentices, an office manager, and a purchasing coordinator. Each received a fair wage, health insurance, and retirement contributions. Liam oversaw commercial operations. Caleb handled residential. Ryan managed service and repairs. We had regular clients, consistent work, and a reputation for excellence and dependability. I proved you can succeed without exploiting others. That treating workers well made them work harder and stay longer. That family who watched you get duped and told you to be grateful wasn't worth sacrificing your dignity for. David's business. It stayed afloat with just 2 residential workers. Sarah and I had coffee every few weeks and discussed specific topics, slowly rebuilding. And Mom, she finally admitted she should have supported me sooner. Looking back, it's a testament to what you can build when you choose dignity over drama and self-worth over the illusion of family peace. But it came at a cost. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, faced with that kind of betrayal, that kind of choice, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments below.